All right. Well, I'm recording also for the benefit of everyone who isn't joining us synchronously, so they'll be able to watch this later. Good morning, everyone. How are y'all doing? So I'm really excited about this class. I hope you are as well. I think modern art is some of the most interesting art to talk about, to discuss, to look at, and to consider. So I really want to hear from everyone's perspective, how they feel about modern art and the works that we share this semester. So a few things that I want to talk about today is kind of class expectations. Since the majority of students are taking this or electing to take this asynchronously, I feel like maybe it's fair just to offer it asynchronous for everyone, which is kind of sad for me, because I really like to have a lively conversation and get immediate feedback, but that's okay. I think because it's summer, because this was advertised as an online class without a time, that it's fair for everyone. I think we can still make it work. So what I'll do is I'll post the videos each day and have give everyone a chance to respond to the videos. So that'll be like attendance. That'll be like, and just a small amount of points, but 5 points per day. And when you multiply that by 20, you have 100 points. So that's pretty substantial. So that really is an incentive to watch the lectures the same day they're recorded and shared on Schoology. They'll be in the folders, and then to do a short response to it. Because otherwise, I think in the summer, because we meet every day, continuity-wise, it seems like a lot of work in a really consolidated, condensed period. So if you let yourself get behind, it can really, really snowball, right? If you say, I'll watch today's lecture tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes around, you say, well, I'll just watch both of these lectures tomorrow. Quickly, you can get really, really far behind. So I'm going to encourage everyone and add an extra incentive for y'all to keep up with the material that way, because I think it'll be a lot easier. So a few things to talk about: the book, talk about the syllabus, talk about the kind of the layout, and your first response will be to respond to the syllabus. And I'm giving you an extra day to do that. So instead of it due today, it's due tomorrow once you've watched this. So this is the textbook for modern art. It is the 7th edition. So when you're looking for this book, be sure that it says 7th edition and that it doesn't say volume 1 or volume 2. What they did basically is they put this book out in a comprehensive format, and then they also put it out as separate volumes. So basically split it in half and called it volume 1 and volume 2. So if you were to get, I think the newer one splits it. So make sure you get the 7th edition, make sure it's the comprehensive, just one volume, and you can get it used. I actually have a used copy here, and feel free to mark it up. I mean, I think there's no way that I could dedicate this to memory and be able to effectively learn it, and in my case, teach it, if I didn't make notations all over the place and write. I know it seems a bit abusive to the book, but it's your book, and people don't mind if they get a used copy and it's heavily marked up. They'll still give you your money back if you want to get your money back at the end. So it's your book, mark it up. I'll also accept the older edition. There's a 6th edition. So this right now on Amazon is going for about 50 bucks used, and you can rent a copy for 50 bucks. So it's not bad. It's a little bit older. And then there's a 6th edition that's going for about $30 used and about $30 to rent. So I don't want this to price anyone out. And you certainly, there's a newer edition that's like the 7th revised and expanded. That's like $150, $200 to buy, $150 to rent. Don't get that one. I was trying to save y'all because I feel like the book hasn't changed that much that I need to break the bank for y'all. So that's the book. Make sure you pick that up. And the ISBN is on Schoology, on the syllabus. And let me just show you a few things here. So I'm going to share my screen. Here is the layout. And by the way, I'm Dustin Bork. Feel free to call me Dustin. There's a lot of people in this class that haven't had me before. So don't call me Dr. Bork, or don't worry about calling me Professor Bork. Dustin is fine. And best way to get a hold of me this summer is probably going to be email. And I do my best to check email as soon as possible, fairly quickly, to get back to you. And also to keep in mind that even though this is asynchronous, and I don't necessarily have office hours, that I still want to be accessible, and that you can meet with me if needed, and we can set up a time and do it in person if you're in Batesville, if you would like to do that, or if you want to meet via Zoom, that's your preference, or if you're further flung, please feel free to reach out to me. Just because I don't have office hours doesn't mean I don't want to be available for you. So here's the layout for this semester. Here's the class Zoom link, which if we're going to go asynchronous doesn't really make sense. Here's the syllabus. And your first response will be to watch this recording and then to fill out, respond to the questions about the syllabus, because I'm not going to cover the syllabus. The expectation is that you read it, you understand it, you know what is in the syllabus and what this class entails, what the expectations are. I will post the lectures here. They are laid out per section. So the first section is chapters 1 through 9. Some days we'll cover 2 chapters, most days we'll cover 1, and each one will be in here. I will also, so tomorrow we'll go ahead and cover chapters 1 and 2. If you don't have your book yet, that's okay. Hopefully you can get it soon. Like if you get it on Amazon Prime, you can get it in the next 2 days. I will post both of the chapter PowerPoints that I walk you through, but I'll also post the recording here once it is live. And then I'll also post the follow-up of your response, which in this case, you would have to answer a couple of questions after watching the lecture. It won't be here. It will be all in the same spot. Here, online responses, and you can see your first one is already up, the syllabus response. After that, what I'll do is I'll have the videos published. They'll be on YouTube, but I'll share a link on Schoology in this lecture section. You'll click on it, watch it. What's nice about asynchronous is you can pause it, take thorough notes, leave, come back to it, rewind if you liked something and want to catch it again, or maybe you didn't quite catch something, want to rewind it, but don't fast forward, right? It works going back, but don't be like, this part's boring, I'm going to skip past this. So here's the 3 different sections, 1 through 9, and then there'll be a test, a second section, the next 10 chapters, another test, and then the final section here. In this class, since it's so condensed, it won't be a comprehensive exam at the end. It'll just be the final test, which is covering the last section. That sound good? And then we have writing about art as well. Yours is going to look a little bit different than this because I have some unpublished things in here right now. But you'll see your first assignment is Artist in Media, and that is actually due this week, this Friday. What I want you to do is find an example of a contemporary artist and how they're represented in the media, either in the news or on a TV show or a movie. How was an artist represented? You know, for instance, a lot of times we can think of, if someone's talking about a contemporary artist, what is something that comes to your mind when they say, oh, this artist is like this, such and such, right? What type of stereotypes are there about artists? Ace?
Oh, you want an actual answer for me?
Yeah, that was a question. It wasn't a rhetorical question, yeah.
Well, I didn't know. Okay, repeat it then.
What's a stereotype that people have about artists?
I think it depends on what type of art you're talking about, but a lot of people have a stereotype that old art is the only valid art and that a lot of modern artists are just, faking it or being lazy or pretentious. Another popular one is that a lot of modern artists aren't really artists and that they're just doing it for like tax fraud and things. So
good. Yeah, this is good. And so someone might say, my kid could do that, right? I don't understand modern art or contemporary art. It seems too easy. They're faking it, like you said, and my kid could do that, right? So is this how people actually are, or is this a product of how they're represented in the media? So what I want you to do, good, bad, or ugly, is find a way that an artist is portrayed in the media, whether it's a movie you've watched or a TV show or even an article. See how an artist is portrayed, like the stereotype, like starving artist, or sometimes artists are portrayed as being lazy or drunk, high on weed all the time. Is that the perception? Does that meet reality, or is it just the way they're portrayed in the media, right? So I want you to kind of respond critically to that and see how maybe it meets the expectation and it doesn't meet the expectation of what art is. You'll do a movie review, and I have a whole list of different movies that you can watch. It'll have to be one from this list. And there are movies that you could check out as DVDs from the library if you watch DVDs still, if you have a DVD player. I know that seems kind of old school. But then there's also streaming services. If you have Amazon or Hulu or Netflix, I list movies that you can watch on each of those. And you all have access to Kanopy. And Kanopy actually has the most amount of artist documentaries as any of the options. So if you log in using your school credentials, you can watch any of these art documentaries on Kanopy. So you'll have a movie review responding to the art in the way that it's portrayed one particular artist. So they're like monographs, essentially just a documentary about one singular artist. You'll also be required to do a visual analysis paper. Many of you are coming from my World Art class, in which you had to do in World Art 1 and World Art 2, I both of those classes had students do a visual analysis paper. So this should seem familiar to you. For those of you who are new, and this is the first art history class you're taking, which is completely acceptable to take it in that order. A visual analysis paper is just telling us what the image is about based on the way that it looks, okay? So the formal elements, the visual elements. Excuse me, sorry. And then something that I wanted to do this semester that's really different, that I don't normally offer in my classes, is called this timeline assignment. And I'm really excited to see how you interpret this, because it can take many different forms, many different kind of iterations of how to make a timeline. But I think this will be a great way for you to do a little more research about a modern or contemporary artist. In particular, the chapters covering the wars, World War I, World War II, and how an artist maybe operated in that space, in that context of a war going on. Maybe they responded directly to the war, this idea of conflict. Maybe it was escapism. Maybe they wanted their work to be nothing about the war. But I want you to pick one artist from these chapters, 10 to 15, that you think does a really interesting case for representing ideas of that time period, that context of war, conflict, and resolution. And so this timeline could make, I think this is really interesting art history research, but a lot of times I think the end result culminating in, say, a paper or a presentation is static, right? And I wanted to come up with a more dynamic way of y'all doing research and to create a product from it. So it could become a story, a series of stories on your Instagram account, highlighting one artist and their timeline. Where were they born? Where did they grow up? Were they in the war? Did they flee their country because a war was going on? What did their art look like? And so this could be on social media. This could be a video. You could make a video of yourself giving this presentation, or a video of the artwork, the artist, etc. You know, it could be something that you put on YouTube. It could be something that you create a poster board, like a traditional kind of presentation, like a poster presentation, creating a new hierarchy. Does the timeline have to be linear? Could it be cyclical? Could it be a triangle? Could you create a new hierarchy? I really want you to think about different ways, and I have some examples of websites. And so maybe if someone has a little computer science, like Molly, for instance, and could do a website, you could even design a website that's interactive that you could click on it, like a Prezi. Has anyone done a Prezi before? A Prezi, yeah, is so different than a PowerPoint or a keynote presentation because it's not necessarily linear. And timelines, if you kind of think of them, typically go from left to right and they're linear. I want you to think about a timeline in a more creative, innovative way so that you can really respond to the artist, their work, and then a clever way of presenting it. So I think this can be a really interesting art history research, right? And more interactive. So that will be another writing assignment. And then for the class, we'll also have, like I mentioned, 3 tests, and the tests and the reviews will all be in here. So that's a bit of a layout for the semester. Also, when you see on the side here, when you log into Schoology on the computer, it'll tell you what's coming up. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on this. I think you could also look at it on your phone as an app if you go to the calendar, but it's not as like, you know, straightforward as seeing it on the computer. So this is where you're going to hand in all of your assignments. This is pretty much the workflow for this semester. And I wanted to share that with y'all so you were familiar with how we're going to use Schoology. Any questions? Class, do you have any questions? At this point, when I ask a question, it's going to be me talking to myself, but that's when you can pause. If this is a normal lecture, I say, are there any questions or how would you respond to this? This is when you can pause, shoot me an email, right? If you have questions at that point. So please do that. Please, let's make this as interactive as possible. Get the book quickly. And I wanted to show you a little bit today thinking about how modern art can connect to our lives. First of all, when I say modern art, what does that mean? And how could the terminology modern art even be, say, biased or problematic, right? Can you think of, Ace, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Can you think of a way in which saying modern art could be problematic or perhaps confusing?
Well, for one thing, modern art is at least 100 years old by now. It's a long, long period, but we still think of it as modern because to us, it seems like it was yesterday. And so the issue with calling it modern art is that a lot of other periods like Rococo or Renaissance, for them, that was modern art. So
True.
by saying modern art, it sort of implies that it's got this, you know, new contemporary, really represents what's going on, but so did all of the other periods.
That's great. That's a great way of thinking about it. And that is how it is problematic, because anyone could start and make their case for when modern begins. And a lot of times people will say the first modern artist is so-and-so, right? Or someone will say Edward Manet is the first modern artist because he was really making work about the times. Well, was Goya not making work about the times? Was, you know, Michelangelo not a modern artist because he was not making art? So you have to start somewhere, right? And generally speaking, modern is a time period. Like Ace mentioned, it's a time period, it's a very specific time period, generally starting with the Industrial Revolution, with the advent of photography. So we can kind of say 1840s, 1860s, and it does also have a period when it ends. Generally, people say after World War II. So yeah, it's over 100 years old, modern art. But if we look at architecture from the 1950s and 1960s, what people popularly call mid-century modern, right? That's architecture that was made in the 1950s, 1960s. That really still speaks to us. Those things that were forward thinking in the 1950s and 1960s are popular again. These things are kind of cyclical, right? So it was modern then, but we also see it as sort of timeless, right? We kind of see a modern art like Frank Lloyd Wright, who was way ahead of his time, as still being aspirational and inspirational today, which is different than contemporary art, which generally speaking, we say is like 1969 and after. And that's because those artists would still be living. So that makes Pablo Picasso a modern artist, and it makes Andy Warhol, even though he's past tense, a contemporary artist, which is really interesting. And you have some slippage between, because we'll study Andy Warhol as a pop artist in the 1964 as a modern artist. But then he continues to make work in the 70s and 80s before he passes away that we consider contemporary art, right? And generally speaking, when you go into a museum, modern art is going to be mostly art like after Post-Impressionism. It's going to be work, you know, mostly from Europe and the United States. And it's going to be a lot of abstract work, Cubism, for instance, and then and you could take photographs of that work because the copyright issues on those are past tense. But contemporary art, when you go into a museum, is going to be artists that are alive now or could be alive now based on just kind of generational timelines. But you usually can't take photographs of it because their copyright is still open, is still with them, right? So there's a distinction there as well. So modern, we typically think of as being representative of a specific era. And that's what we're really going to study this semester, but we also get into contemporary art at the end, those things that happened 1969 and after, sort of post modern art and after, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of context. I also think that sometimes some people have an expectation or trouble understanding what modern art is. Do you know what I mean by that? Like people say like modern art is difficult to understand. And so I think a lot of times people ask the question, what is it? What does it mean? So the sort of what question, right? And I think actually modern art can be some of the easiest art to understand. There was an artist, Tom Stoddard, who said, modern art is so simple to understand. If you can walk up to it, it's on a wall, it's a painting. If you can walk around it, it's a sculpture. And that seems like maybe a reductive way of thinking about it. But a lot of times modern art is simply art for art's sake, which is something that Whistler coined as one of the first modern artists, the end of the 19th century. But it's something that we still see today, that if it's formal, if it's visually, if you find it interesting, it's successful, right? Just like abstract art. You don't necessarily have to understand it in the grand scheme of things. But so instead of asking the question, what does it mean? I think there are other questions that we can ask that help us to understand what it's about and give it context. For instance, why did the artist make it? Could be a better question to ask, to pose. When was it made? That could be a good question to pose. Where was it made? So kind of giving the context too. Where was this piece made? Was it made in Nazi-occupied Germany in World War II? Was it made during the Harlem Renaissance in the 1940s in New York? Where it was made and sort of the conditions that are surrounding the artist in that specific time and space and place could help us to understand it. So instead of what is it, how was it made? Also, did the artist sculpt it? Did they carve it? Is it methodical? Was it a sketch? Was it more labor intensive? That can help us understand it as well. So instead of what is it, why is it? How is it? Where was it made? Can give us a broader context and help us to understand it. These are questions, and these are definite questions that I want you to grapple with this semester. I want you to think critically about art. I want you to pose questions. And what's great about modern art and what's great about contemporary art, I think, is that it poses as many questions as it answers. So I'm not necessarily giving you the answers. The book isn't necessarily giving you the answers on why Picasso tried to make one of his wives look hideous on a beach like a crab. But the question is as valid as the answer, right? And so I'm hopefully arming you with the right questions this semester so that you can think more critically about this art to get at an understanding. So that's a goal for this semester. And it's one that I think that you can become advocates for art and ambassadors for art and get rid of this idea that art is something that you have to easily understand, or that, you don't want to, have to think too hard about or contemplate it. I don't necessarily think that the best art is art that you either get right away, right? That answers all of the questions neatly. And I also don't think it has to be super esoteric. I think sometimes the best art is just art that sits with us for a really, really long time. And we have to want to go back. These are like familiar faces for me. These are like friends that I want to go back and visit, that can really hit me emotionally. And I don't even understand why certain pieces do that and others don't. But I really am excited about this semester. I hope you are as well. I love talking about art. I'm super passionate about it. So even though it's going to be mostly just me talking to myself, I hope that you can still find it engaging, interesting, and reach out. Shoot me an email, shoot me a message. And once the videos are posted, be sure to do the responses. And for the most part, they'll be about an hour and a half. And there will be times where I'll literally ask you to pause it and write down, here's a question I have for you. Write down your response to this question. I want you to go look at this piece right now. What's your response to this piece? So it becomes a little more interactive instead of you just listening to me talk for an hour and a half. So that's some breakout sessions. And instead of us being in a classroom together, we're all remotely learning this at the same time. Sound good? Any questions for me? Take a look at the syllabus. Tomorrow I will post the lecture as soon as I'm done. So most days I'll probably be, it takes a little bit of time once the lecture is finished recording for me to upload it. But most days what I'll shoot for doing is having it uploaded a little bit after lunch. So maybe about 1 o'clock. It'll be posted, and then you'll have the rest of the day. So by midnight, I'd like you to watch it and respond to it. And then that'll get your 5 points per day. All right. Peace. See y'all. Signing off. Sayonara. Bye.